Get real, child. Let's get real.
Grass is an unusual plant. Unlike trees, they're not designed to grow for a long time, but in spurts of growth before becoming mature. Grass then starts over with new growth, leaving the old parts to die off and deteriorate. Doing so allows sunlight to reach new growth. Grass is more than something pleasant to sit on for an afternoon picnic. It can be part of a comprehensive solution for one of the most concerning issues facing the world today. On average, the top 6 inches of grassland soils have 7.75 tons of microorganisms per acre, but the richest soils can have up to 15 tons, according to Alan Savory. As an experienced farmer and rancher, I believe maximum impact for lowering CO2 levels all over the world is by engaging in Savory's holistic grazing, as well as driving innovative solutions for grassland systems. Over 40% of the Earth's land forest, over 12 billion acres, are grasslands. Their inherent ability to store carbon in the soil make it a key pathway for sequestration. Investing in the proper management of wild and domestic grazers can quickly reverse the course of climate change by restoring healthy grasslands across our planet. So let's get real about it.
Did you know you can re-engineer your soil with just cows, grass, biochar, and dung beetles? Yep. Australian farmer Doug Powell got the idea and proved it all on his own. He thought, I'll hire an army of Bubba Bison dung beetles from Spain as my personal carbon sequestration force. Then I'll mix some molasses with biochar and feed it to my cows every morning. Yeah, and then I'll watch them beetles get to work. And boy, did they bury that carbon dung. His soils increased in organic matter and nutrient levels as his grasses increased in nutrient density. Doug no longer needed to fertilize or feed his cows hay. He even stopped giving them antibiotics. All the while, his cows got fatter, healthier, and even burped less. To top this, his carbon-fed cows are making him 13,000 more bucks annually. Yeah! Doug Powell, we tip our hat to you and give a Texas yeehaw for getting real. Now back to David.
Grass is a curious thing. If left on its own, grass will achieve less growth and can even die out in dry climates, while properly managed fires or controlled burns can really benefit grasslands. Burns enable it to spring back from its root and stockpile seeds. Native American tribes held this knowledge and utilized fire wisely. However, intermittent grazing causes the grass to sequester more carbon in the soil, while fire releases an abundance of carbon into the air. Not to mention how unplanned and unmanaged fires can lead to devastating consequences. Therefore, it is better to manage our natural areas to prevent large wildfires while also moving grazing animals rather than leaving them alone. Did you know that the horse is one of the most destructive animals to holistic grazing, and if left unchecked by man or any significant predators, can erode grasslands into deserts? That's why it is critical to look to farmers and ranchers, not just scientists, for solutions to natural problems. Why? Because there's an intricate connection between animals, soil, grass, and carbon within our environment that's not commonly known. In healthy soil, animal urine soaks in and is used by soil organisms to create humus and other nitrogen-rich compounds, while the humble dung beetle plays a critical role by spreading out and burying their manure, fertilizing the ground. Healthy pastures have an abundance of them, but many pastures are rife with poisons to kill worms and parasites. The absent dung beetle is just another example of how man's interference impacts the earth's ability to fertilize itself. Speaking of fertilizer, how does the cow play into the equation for climate change? Recently, cows have been caught in the environmental crossfire, being targeted for 2 reasons. Greenhouse gas methane emissions, especially with intense livestock operations, are byproducts of their complex digestive system, and traditional grazing practices used today can degrade pastures. Yes, while methane is produced by anaerobic bacteria in bovine stomachs that break down fiber into digestible food, there are methanotropes, methane-eating bacteria that also exist and can be positioned to gobble up the methane as the cattle graze, especially if seeded with biochar in healthy pastures like dug plows. Cattle are walking vessels for a wide variety of beneficial organisms that create complex proteins from simple sources of carbon and nitrogen in its stomach. This leads to greater nutrients ultimately being fed into our soils and nourishing grasslands. Due to the incredible variety of bacteria in a cow's biome, their manure is rich in bioavailable nutrients for direct use by plants and microbes. To counter the second environmental argument against the cow, we can turn to Alan Savory. His ideas have worked on millions of acres around the world. Savory has restored degraded land to rich carbon-sequestering productivity. He discovered the key to healthy grasslands is to simulate the activity of herd ruminants under pack predator pressure, which is how grassland evolved. This biomimicry allows ample time for the land to rest and regenerate before the herd returns and the cycle renews. Ironically, his methods also produce more beef per acre, so universal adoption would help solve the carbon crisis and increase the food supply. I encourage you to dive into the links below to learn more on Savory and other regenerative organizations driving positive solutions. For me, there's something wonderful about raising and managing a herd of cattle. Year in, year out, many ranchers do it, despite losing money using traditional methods. Cattle are being sold today for the same price as 50 years ago, while equipment and other costs have gone up significantly. I believe a grass-fed system where quality meat producers in the business of selling beef to stores or customers directly would be much better on all levels. An innovation I'm personally developing is agriculture equipment for overhead harvesting native prairie grass at a high height in order to produce a great deal of grass-fed beef and energy. You can go to prairiegrasssystems.com for more details. Another idea is having smaller slaughterhouses located where there are clusters of cattle being fed on native prairie grass. That way, cattle could walk to the slaughterhouse on their final day. There's so many ways to better manage grasslands that work for the planet and for us. Let's start with more economical, ethical, and practical ways that build healthy soils and local meat production. To discuss this now is Matt Hamilton, a friend, business partner, and owner of the renowned local yokel based in McKinney, Texas. Matt, let's get real.
My name's Matt Hamilton. I grew up north of Durant, Oklahoma. We've been there ever since the United States federal government was nice enough to relocate us there from Georgia in 1853. So we're still there on land our Choctaw family's placed on back in the mid-1800s. I grew up in a farming and ranching family, so traditional southern Oklahoma agriculture, cow-calf operation. We farmed peanuts, local, your typical row crops, peanut and cotton in that area. But what really Hamilton family is involved in there is agribusiness. So we're your local hometown feed, seed, chemical fertilizer dealer, peanut dryer. We had cotton gin. So we were involved in commercial agriculture as much or more than production. But definitely growing up in production agriculture and in commercial agriculture, which is a very different world. It's kind of like being in the building the car business versus the selling the car business. I didn't know much about North Texas, but I graduated from Oklahoma State with an agriculture economics degree in 1998, and I remember one thing on a special project. They said there were about 600,000 people living in Collin County And that wasn't very far from me. And those 600,000 people had more disposable income than the 3 million people who lived in Oklahoma. So I remembered that. So I came down here to make a living in this economy, left agriculture from 2002 until 2009, seeking to get back into ranching for profit. This very novel idea that hasn't been accomplished in this country since about 1885. So trying to get back to ranching for profit by becoming vertically integrated. There was a large push towards buying locally, buying in farmers markets, buying grass-fed, steroid-free, hormone-free, antibiotic-free local beef. So we opened the butcher shop in 2010. We brought in a lot of other products as well as the beef we were producing. Everything's local and I'm the yokel. That's kind of the joke over at the local yokel. We open a butcher shop. So what you do is you figure it out. So your first thing you do is you produce some okay beef, and then you will probably honestly produce some really sorry beef, and then produce a little bit better, and then produce a little bit better. So along the way, at first I was raising all the cattle and hauling the cattle alive, hauling the carcasses, and doing a big part of the butchering. So all right, so then as we grew, you can't do it all. So as the business grew from one part-time employee to 12, 14 full-time employees, I was stretched pretty thin, and my model for grass finishing cattle was I had producers that I was buying their yearling weaned steers and grass finishing them there in Oklahoma. A drought came along, not very long after we had the butcher shop open, and these guys all liquidated their cow herds. And that kind of left me wondering where my future was. I had cattle in the pipeline, but there was a horizon point where I was going to run out of beef. And a guy shows up in a Suburban, and he says he's got some local grass-fed beef. And I've heard people bring me stuff all the time. And he said, "Man, I'm producing some pretty decent marbled beef." And he showed up kind of the end of the day. And we're going to dinner at a restaurant I was selling grass-fed burgers to. So he had some steaks, vacuum sealed from a processor, and they were pretty good. They looked pretty decent. They were probably better than the steaks that I had in the counter at the time because I was just spread so thin. So that's when I first met David Munson, and we looked at some steaks that he had in a cooler in the back of the Suburban, and we walked over and had one of my burgers at a restaurant around the corner from the butcher shop that I was selling meat to at the time, and started down a road of buying cattle from David off his ranch there on the Red River, to getting to know David over the years, and then developing a business partnership with David on the cattle side. So a question you had for me is, what does sustainability look like in local beef production? So I get asked a lot, well, what does sustainable mean? What does sustainable mean? The first thing that sustainable has to be is profitable. Because if you're not profitable, you're not sustainable. So no matter what else you're doing, if it's not profitable, it's not sustainable. Of course, there's agriculture. The government loves to influence agriculture and put some money here, put some money there. Now, I'm not talking about that type of profitability, sustainability, real sustainability. So real sustainability is producing a product that's a quality product that the consumer desires, and producing it in a way that is profitable to the rancher, profitable to the processor, profitable to the retailer, but affordable to the consumer. So there's a lot of efficiencies that the big guys have. So when you're running these large plants that have 4,000 to 8,000 head per day per plant capacity, there are efficiencies there that we don't have. When you're trucking cattle 40 head in a semi versus 2 or 3 head at a time, there's efficiencies there. To be sustainable on local, grass-based, whether that is traditional grass-fed where the cattle consume the product off of the field, or whether that's David's process for harvesting these grasses and drying them and feeding them to the cattle. But a forage-based, locally produced product, to be sustainable, has to have efficiencies. So we have to meet all those markers along the way to do that. So it's been pretty interesting to see his progression into this focus on carbon sequestration and the work that's done on remineralization to up carbon sequestration, wherever you're at, on whichever side of this you're on, there's a great opportunity, no matter what your viewpoint is. I'm for things that support local agriculture and can be profitable and beneficial to farmers and ranchers. And a system, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, we agree we need to put some carbon back in the ground. We know we're taking carbon out of the ground, we're putting it in the air. All the data here, that you're not here to argue the data points of how much where. We know we need to put carbon back in the ground. The earth does that. It does it more efficiently when the soil is healthy. So we're getting soils healthy and upping production and producing more food in this country, for this country. And if we, as farmers, Michael Martin Murphy said the cowboys are going to save the world again. They're just going to do it through carbon sequestration this time. So it's all the cowboys to the heroes again. And the financial benefit that this could provide farmers and ranchers who just do not get paid adequately for their production. Not everyone is called to have a butcher shop and a restaurant and to do this. I really just want to go ranch. I just want to go raise cattle. And I thought I could raise cattle and come to town one day a week and sell beef. And God had a different plan for me. So there's always a crisis. There's a crisis. We're talking about the climate is a crisis. Well, there's a crisis coming whose term date is a whole lot sooner than any climate crisis that there could be. And that is your food supply. Because the average age of the American farmer and rancher is getting older and older and older. They used to be in their 50s, then they were in their 60s. Now they're average in their 70s. And when the average age of the guy producing your food is starting to exceed the average age of life expectancy of your country, I don't know what you call that, but I think it's a crisis. So, my granddad bought that tractor brand new. 1949. You could make a living farming and ranching in 1949. You could buy a Ford tractor, right? Pay cash for it. He was not an educated man, but he was a smart man. And he's able to raise his family on a farm, on a ranch. Had a good quality life. And a young man today can't do that. He cannot do that. Unless he inherited millions of dollars, he cannot make enough money to raise his family on a small farm and ranch. You have to be a huge operator. You have to have millions of dollars of equipment. You have to have $30, $40 million in land, at least $2 or $3, $4 million in land. You can't start out. You can't come out of the Great Depression with no money. You can't build up. You can't increase your assets. Right? So there's I want people to have opportunity to raise their families.
Get real, child. Let's get